If humanity was to terraform Mars, what would it look like? And what kind of social and economic system would enable us to survive in the long term? To discuss this, I'm joined by Michael Kubler, host of the Abundant Mars podcast. Me and Michael are also members of a global sustainability advocacy organization called the Zeitgeist Movement, which in my view, to this day, presents the best overall viewpoints and solutions to the many crises humanity currently faces. We don't have an attachment to any labels or ideologies, but rather the recognition of maintaining a systems approach to societal management and human sustainability for the 21st century. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others. Now, let's begin. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm having a special episode today because I'm with my friend Michael Kubler, and he is the host of the Abundant Mars podcast, which is a really cool concept. And I'll have Michael break that down further. But just to give a little breakdown, me and Michael are part of a sustainability organization called the Zeitgeist Movement. It's a global sustainability organization, and the group is undergoing some changes lately. But basically, for the past 15 years now, we've been advocating for a new economic model. I'm sure a lot of you might know what I've heard of it. It's called the resource-based economy. And it's a concept that was advocated by people like Jacques Fresco, who is, big on my channel. I have put videos of him all over the channel. And just, like overall sustainability thinking, sustainable thought doesn't have to be tied to leftist ideology and Marxism or socialism per se. We're doing something completely different here. And let us know a little bit what your podcast is about.
Yeah, I was introduced to the Zeitgeist movement within sort of the first year that Zeitgeist Addendum was out. I'd already watched the first Zeitgeist films, but it was Addendum that actually explained, the RBE concept.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, learned all sorts of stuff about capitalism and the issues with an alternative economic systems. And then a couple of years ago, it dawned on me that Elon Musk and SpaceX, they're going to be able to send ships to Mars. But I watched a few videos and realized they didn't really know much about what's going to be set up on Mars. What is that going to involve and how that's going to be? So I realized, oh, this is a great opportunity. We need to not have capitalism be the default on Mars. Elon Musk's sending ships to Mars, and that'll be great, but we're also going to be sending capitalism to Mars, most likely. And I don't understand how that will actually work in reality because there's no existing ecosystem there to, destroy. There's no existing anything there. There's nothing to
There's
exploit.
nothing there to exploit.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you send people there and you try to exploit them, you're probably going to destroy the Mars base and everything else. It's going to fail. So you need a much better system. You need a system that is generating an ecosystem and is based on the main tenets that I talk about is access abundance, closed loop material flows, those sorts of things. You also need automation. You need robots there because Mars is a horrible place. It's like lots of radiation, low gravity, not much energy. There's a whole bunch of technical things that make it very challenging to try living on Mars.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, there's. I listened to a part of one of your episodes. Like, we're gonna have to live underground, right? Because the radiation is so brutal, and if you want to go out there, you have to take like anti-cancer medication or something just to be on the surface for a little while. People don't realize. Like, I mean, my imagination is just completely blown when I think about space. I used to be a big nerd on like space science and astronomy, not astrology. That's silly stuff. I'm not into that. But astronomy, the science of like what happens out there, it's such a beautiful thing. But like rarely, I mean, we don't appreciate how brutal space really is, how unliving, how unforgivable. Like space, just neutral space itself is like what minus 270 degrees Celsius. The amount of solar radiation you're being hit with is so crazy because we're not protected by the Earth's
Mm.
magnetosphere, or what was it called? The magnetic
Magnetosphere.
field of what is it?
Yeah, it is magnetosphere.
Magnetosphere, yeah. So the Earth's
Yeah.
magnetosphere protecting us, shielding us from the bombardment of the sun's rays. So yeah, I mean, these idiots, these people like Elon Musk, who are not scientists, they're just businessmen. They have no idea what they get themselves into, and like going to terraform another planet. How stupid! Like, we have this planet, we have planet Earth, we got all these things available to us. We have clean air, clean water, at least for now. We have these things. We have the ability to bring about like a paradise on Earth, abundance on Earth, but yet we're all obsessed with like terraforming other planets. Now, before you jump into the next one, I just want to run it by you. Like, how crazy is it that they're talking about, like, isn't it so dangerous that they're talking about terraforming other planets? Because that pretty much condones this, perpetuates this mentality that, like, you know what, planet Earth is just like expendable, it's gonna go soon, so it's time for us to think about other planets because this planet is not going to be able to sustain the current population, which is such a dangerous, Malthusian kind of way of thinking. Don't you think?
Yeah. So I don't think the idea of going to another planet is stupid. I think we're explorers, at least
Mm-hmm.
a part of us is that exploring curiosity nature.
Yep.
And I go look at my kids. I got a 2 year old and a 6 year old and 5 year old, and they're really just very curious. And I think going to Mars, we are going to learn a lot, and it will also be a very big boost to the capability of humans to survive and life to flourish on other planets. So if we do get hit with a meteorite or I don't know, like a gamma ray burst or something that we can't really stop or control on Earth, not all life just gets extinguished from what we know of, at least in the universe. Like there may not be life on other planets, or it may not be at the capability that we have, at least. So I feel like we do actually have a almost a moral responsibility to try and develop on other planets. But I definitely also agree with you that we shouldn't be doing it in a way where we're treating Earth as something that's to be trashed and we're just going to move on to another planet. That bit is definitely wrong. So that's where I agree. We've got to be um, changing our mindset more than anything. So that idea that we're just going to trash Earth comes from a just the way that we currently deal with materials.
Yeah.
We take stuff out of the ground, process it. You know, here you go. You've got you know a new phone, a new whatever, and then you use it up. You throw it away, and it goes
Yep.
to the trash. There isn't a continuous cycle. So we need to change to a system of production that is a closed loop material flow. So the book Cradle to Cradle explains this really well. And it's also known with a few other terms, but that usually boils down to you've got biological nutrients and technical nutrients. So, glass, metals, plastics, and these are all technical nutrients, and then food and biological matter, and even clothes and those sort of things. Often, cotton type stuff. That's a biological nutrient, and we unfortunately do a very bad job by putting a lot of those things together in different ways and making it really hard to separate. But that's why we need a new revolution in the way we make things so that I can have my phone disassembled into component parts. I can, also go, look, here's a broken shovel or something, and it can be smelted down and remade into a new shovel. Um,
Yeah, so like
we,
materials reconfiguration has to be available. Like, nanotechnology is pretty good, I think, allows us to break things down to the molecular level and then restructure them to create something else. And like you're saying, I'm pretty sure what you mean is like we have to be extremely frugal and efficient with how we use resources if we go out in space. Like
Mm.
you can't have an egregiously like uh, resource extracting thing like the free market. You can't have a concept like the free market if you're
Th-
going out there. What are you gonna
th-
say?
Yeah, there's no oil on Mars. We
Yeah.
can't just extract some more oil. There will be plenty of iron
Well,
and
they're
silicon and
saying.
some other bits.
I guess I heard people say like you have to drill down very very deep into Mars to get energy. Is there gas there that you can extract for energy or no?
There's not oil, gas, anything like that. Uh,
There's no natural gas.
no, because there's
No.
not been any bacteria there, at least
Oh,
not that we know of.
okay.
Um, so all, and we've only sent a couple of robots there. They've done some very basic drilling, but not deep drilling. We know that
Yeah.
there is water on Mars. We know that there's plenty of CO2. You can extract the CO2 out of the atmosphere. You can make oxygen. You can extract the carbon from that. You can use some of these resources. You can go mining for iron. The reason it's red is because the iron oxide in the sand on the surface has oxidized. So we know that we've got some of the main building blocks, but also the most of the dust is made up of it's got perchlorates in it, which is toxic. It's basically a form of like chlorine, so you can't be breathing that stuff in. You're going to need it, and it's also very statically charged. It sticks to things, so it's definitely not uh, a good environment. Energy wise, yeah, look, it's further from the sun. It only gets about 40% as much solar radiation. It's only about 37% the gravity of Earth. And so we're probably going to need some nuclear fusion there, ideally fusion, but maybe we won't have fusion technology ready by then. So it might be nuclear fission. Um, yeah, you need to be having that sort of energy to be running just the air filtration systems to be creating oxygen from the CO2. There's all sorts of different bits there, so energy is going to be really important. But also, as I said, look, there's no oil you can just extract, so you don't get plastics, you don't get all the pharmaceuticals and all sorts of other things there.
Hmm.
So probably going to have some extra area for growing artificial, you know, oil type based, you know,
So
plants and vegetables, just for
let
all
me
of that
ask you,
stuff.
like the movie The Martian with Matt Damon was pretty wrong, right? The things that guy was able to pull off, was that even feasible?
The only thing that's really scientifically not accurate was the storm at the start. So it the because the atmosphere is only 1% that of Earth's, it's just doesn't have the force to actually like cause damage. So they do have dust storms, they do have storms, and they can go quite fast speeds, but it just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have any you know force behind it. So um, almost everything else is like 99% or 98% accurate. Like there's some bits where at the particular rate that he was mixing some chemicals, it would have gotten really hot in there or something like that. But in general, yeah, it was pretty good. And even things like using his own feces to turn into manure to then like if it's your own excrement you can do it, but if it was someone else's you have to go through some biological treating process for it. So
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah.
Well, the reason why I really hated that movie, I couldn't stand it. I wanted to turn it off. Like I think I turned it off halfway through, is because, well, it's not that important, but like to me it is, because the whole slingshot principle of how you can use the gravity of another planet to accelerate the spaceship that they're
Mhm.
trying to go to pick him up, whatever. The fact that the head of NASA didn't know about this and some random pothead in college was like, "Oh, this is what we can do," is like, no, that was a well established principle in NASA like 30, 40 years ago. What the heck are you guys doing? How can a director be so ignorant to not know? Like Ridley Scott, dude, Ridley, stop making movies, Ridley, okay? Because you're an old senile man who probably nobody told you maybe during the process of creating the film that like, yo, we know about this principle, the slingshot principle, and like he's doing everything he can to make sure that guy dies on Mars. He was so irresponsible. So I was like, you know what? This is just terrible writing. I can't watch this anymore. That's the reason why I turned it off. But it is still fascinating the idea of like terraforming another planet. But like as we know, man, as you and I know, and the people in our ecosystem, whatever, of this kind of thinking, like you cannot have a market-based, competitive, cutthroat, exploitative mentality if you're going to go to any planet to do anything. Because look at what we're doing on Earth.
Mhm.
Look at on planet Earth where we have abundant water, abundant topsoil, abundant clean air. We have minerals, all these things at our disposal. What are we doing with it? Look how we're turning this planet into a wasteland, and we're creating mass poverty and destitution by design. Not like this has to be that way, So the fact that we're mismanaging things so badly on Earth is only a catastrophe if we go to Mars. And like I know for a fact that if we go to any planet, we're not going to maintain a free market capital system. We can't. It won't work out there. And that might actually be a good reflection point for humanity to realize, hey, look, on Mars, we can't have money. We can't have competition. We have to fully cooperate, use our resources intelligently. We can't have a market base. We can't have a stock exchange on Mars. We have to imagine like a very primitive hunter gatherer settlement, how they operated as a tribe, where they get together and make decisions, democratically, and have horizontal power structure and all that kind of stuff that we really much obsess about and talk about. They have
Mhm.
to implement that over there, and a big reason why I'm talking to you about this because I was blown away by Douglas Millett, who's like, for those who don't know, I might have him on my show one day. Douglas Millett, who is a former NASA shuttle system engineer, who basically did a lecture in Norway talking about how we can terraform Mars, and if we are to terraform Mars, here are the key bullet points we have to follow, and here's the capitalist bullet points. We cannot follow any of the capitalist principles. Ditch that. And if we're going to be surviving on Mars, we have to have collaboration, no money, no trade, just pursuing pure efficiency and sustainability principles, which have the complete diametrical opposites of capitalist thinking. But what do you think?
Yeah. Um, I'd say that the idea of terraforming Mars, it's it's not something that I think about, even though I have been thinking about let's go to Mars. What is a Mars base going to be like? All of that. Terraforming Mars is a whole different thing, and it's going to be in the form of hundreds and hundreds of years to do something, even just some basics. Um, to put it that, look, Mars is average temperature. It's minus 60 degrees there. That's centigrade. But it's still just like freezing. Its average temperature is about the same as the coldest temperature on Earth. And it gets down to minus 120 degrees or something like that. It gets cold. It still
Wow.
occasionally gets up to 20 degrees Celsius. So it's
Hmm.
like cold, but not at the hottest it ever gets. So yeah, there's quite a big temperature variation. Um, we talked about radiation. So you need to have a layer of stuff that will stop radiation. And the two good things that we know of is water. Water is really good at stopping radiation. Like if there was a nuclear rod or something in my hand and my hand was outstretched, my hand might get fully radiation burned, but the rest of my body, probably wouldn't, because that half a meter of water is such a good way of stopping radiation. Just as an
Hmm.
example, the issue is water is also really important for so many other things that we're going to need. So one of the other options is frozen CO2. So we're probably going to need a layer of frozen CO2 above us. There's meteorites, and there's not much of an atmosphere, so those meteorites can be quite destructive. So you then probably need a layer of Martian topsoil. So yeah, we're going to be living inside bunkers, mostly under the ground. There might just be some basic mounds. It's not going to be fun there.
Yeah.
We're going to have all sorts of technical challenges, and we don't also want to be competing with people. We don't want it that like there's some people who run the nuclear power plant and some people who run the solar power system, and they're fighting over things, and then you know something breaks, and instead of working collaboratively together, they're still competing. It's just like, well, everyone dies when there's not enough power.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Well, like that's what people really need to understand, that the idea of going and terraforming another planet should be such a big reflection point for us to realize how stupid the free market is. Because on planet Earth, um, we have the leeway to make stupid decisions. We can completely have a project fail and collapse, and people lose their jobs, and then they have to go into bankruptcy and welfare and whatnot. People starve from not having food. They get kicked out of their homes. Those things can happen on Earth. You know why? Because we have an Earth that can sustain life. There can be plan B, C, D, and E when it comes to little settlements and whatnot, cities, governments. But when you're on a completely new planet, alien planet, which is so unforgiving, if your project fails, everybody dies. So that should be a wake up call for like how, you know, it is a little bit, I guess, in some ways can be compared to early humans who lived on on the continent of Africa. We didn't have technology. We were just literally naked out on the Sahara, in the desert or in the jungle where we have no protection. Either we collaborate strictly and we really get our shit together, or we just die. We just die from to disease, to starvation, and to predators. It's a very dangerous thing out there. The natural world is very brutal, unforgiving. So we had to collaborate and create very intelligent, strict systems of social communication to make sure that we're efficient and we survive and we pass on the knowledge to next generations. Now, Mars is complete opposite. It doesn't have predators. It doesn't have all the things that the dangers that Africa presented, but like it's got other challenges, but it requires the same way of thinking, same kind of behavior for us to survive. We have to collaborate. We have to share. We can't hoard knowledge. All the things that we talk about that are complete opposites of the fundamental principles of capitalism have to be adhered to even on a higher level when you're on a planet like Mars. You know?
Yeah. You can only go to Mars every about 2.1 years. It takes 7 months to get there, maybe 6 months to come back.
Hmm.
And you're usually going to go for 7 months, stay there for at least 2 years, come back. That's quite a long trip time. So if you go there and rock up and you go, oh look, shit, look, we didn't bring enough food and our crops are failing. Let's just order Uber Eats. Like that doesn't work.
Yeah. You don't have any things to fall back on.
No. So you got to make sure that what you're doing there is going to work well and that you can repair everything. So
Yep.
we're going to need an open source society there where you're going to need to be able to fix stuff yourself. You're going to want, all sorts of 3D printing and other manufacturing things there. And the software and the hardware has to be open source. It has to be something where you can go in there and fix. Because if it turns out that your dishwasher is simply using too much water, now sure, there's a closed water cycle and everything else, but you still might find that it's just using so much that it's not efficient enough. You're spending all sorts of resources dealing with that. It might be a problem, and you're going to have to fix that yourself. You can't wait 2 years or maybe even 3 years for someone to come and fix it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
open source
The
society.
whole sorry to cut you off, but like the thing you mentioned about the closed resource cycle, it's so important for people to understand this because it applies so much to what we're doing here on planet Earth. Because we have these resource flow throughs, in on Earth, where these massive corporations, because they have access and ownership over so much of the resources on the planet, they can like ship things all over the planet, right? Ship resources here or there. Even though we have arable land here in, like, in the United States, and let's say California, they still don't mind shipping crap from Mexico or another continent to the same country that has the capability to like grow crops, because of the bottom line, because of money. So like, because they want to save money. So like, same with energy. Like, we don't mind drilling the last oil, drilling the last drop of oil, because it's a substance that can be sold for profit. But guess what? There's tremendous hazards with oil because of obviously climate change, pollution, destruction, and obviously peak oil. And once oil gets diminished enough, it's so expensive that the whole thing can collapse, because it's the basis of our society. But if you go to Mars, you have to have a closed loop energy system. Energy is not coming from the outside. You have to have like a solar, some kind of a very highly efficient energy harvesting system, and you have to have, like you said, closed water loop. You don't have things, in capitalism. You destroy a town, you extract everything. You still ship things from here and there to that location to keep it going. But when you don't have an external input, and you have to keep everything as efficient as possible, that right there could make people really rethink the idea of what it means to have an economy. An economy is about reducing waste and increasing efficiency. It's not about just like how much you can just hoard and exploit and keep things moving around and be inefficient. Like, people oftentimes don't understand that true economic efficiency comes down to resource efficiency. Capitalism has distorted that concept to like, no, market efficiency. Whereas, okay, it doesn't matter if we pollute the water or overfish the oceans or over extract the forest, because we're making money. You know, we have to have a sustainable business model, which is like money has to be coming in so we can maintain our profit structure. That is completely alien. That is completely an alien concept to planet Earth, which is like, no, a true like ecosystem. Make sure that to maintain, yeah, all the things we talk about. But like, um, but I got lost in my thoughts. But like, basically, what I was saying is closed loop system, and how a true economic principles have nothing to do with capitalism. And if we want to maintain a true, like, what would an economy on Mars look like? If you have an economy on Mars, what would people be doing, and how would they be surviving?
Okay, I just want to briefly talk about, you're talking about market efficiency, and I think you're right. We've got a broken accounting system. We are optimizing for profits, but not, that, as you said, efficiency of resources and everything else. We
Yeah.
should be in a cradle to cradle society, uh, and it only needs a couple of small changes to really make a big difference. Big one is a way of returning things back to the system. So I call it the Tupperware economy, as a bit of a joke. Like, hey, when I order things, online right now, people complain about how much, their Amazon cardboard, or their bubble wrap, or whatever they get is. Well, if we had really good, high quality, materials for just containers for shipping
Yeah.
things, and when
Yeah.
you're done with it, it just goes back in a, you put it back in a container, and it that goes back into the system, and it's a distributed network for moving things.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly you don't need these throwaway containers, and
Yeah.
the ability to send stuff back. You can start going, hey, you know what, I accidentally ordered something that's not right. I just send it back to the system, and hey, we don't need this anymore. I send it back. But you're now getting more into a situation where it's access abundance. So we are saying, look, I need access to certain resources in order to survive, and some in order to thrive. Uh, I do computer work. Obviously, I need quite a good computer, um, and I have a variety of other requirements. But I also, instead of having a monetary obligation, I should have a responsibility to those systems that support us. So this is the way I think about, especially the system on Mars. Instead of going, hey, look, you know, you just got to pay for everything. It's no, you are being provided a bunch of resources by the different systems, and you have a responsibility to those systems. So that responsibility can be met at, I should point out the systems are technical systems, internet, computer, that sort of stuff that's enabling this discussion right now. Obviously, there's ecosystem, food, and all sorts of air, water, all those other different parts, and there's also social systems. So you're talking about democracy, decision, collaboratively working together, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you change to that mindset, so you've got access abundance and you've got a responsibility to the systems that support you, that makes a really big difference to how we go about things. Obviously, you've got the cradle to cradle closed loop material flows happening there. So now you don't need to keep extracting stuff. So the closed loop thing means, look, if it turns out there's not much copper on Mars, and we were using copper for certain types of wiring, then maybe we put some effort into developing a
An alternative.
ceramic based superconducting technology or something like that. And because it's so cold there, it's easier to use. And maybe we use that instead of and we can use the copper for other things that we need. So that's that closed loop bit going. There's obviously now work that needs to be done. That's a priority of saying this thing is a truly scarce resource in that we can't get much. We need it for other uses. So let's see what else we can do and to reduce that need. So that's how you deal with true scarcity versus the world that we live in. Our current system is mostly based on artificial scarcity. Like I was
Yeah.
having a discussion with my partner, my wife, last night about uh, diamonds, and she didn't even know that we can artificially create diamonds.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about cubic zirconia, I'm like real diamonds,
Hmm.
and they aren't a precious resource. There's actually plenty of them. It's just that we have De Beers and an entire
Yeah.
industry that has made them seem really valuable and expensive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Like
that's artificial.
the whole distortion with our culture, with like the idea of what are they called? Like the painting that's only one kind of. What is that term? It's like a rarity. Rarity
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
rare
Versus a
painting.
commodity.
Yeah.
The
So like the commodification of scarcity is a very stupid thing. And you know, like when we go to like when we try to do something like terraform another planet, or we do things in space, those scientists, their incentives and their priorities are much different than what we're doing on Earth. Like the average person in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, they're just worried about keeping their job, paying their bills, and maintaining their social media status, whatever that is, maintaining some position in the artificial, useless capitalist hierarchy. Those are things we're concerned about on Earth. Over there, they're concerned about, okay, make sure the water filtration system is running smoothly, make sure the air purification is running good, make sure that we have energy, our batteries are running like once you have those are your goals. Your social priorities will be much different as well, and the way you conduct yourself will be much different as well. So because going back to what you were saying about the throwaway culture, when you have a throwaway culture on Earth, just everything is looked at as an exploitable thing. Everything's looked at as an inventory for exploitation. Every human being you look at is like, oh, what can they do for me? So the whole thing is based on an exploitative schema. Whereas when you're like somewhere on Mars, you can't afford to have that mentality, and so that will reshape your values. Because like yeah, like you said, you have like a processing. This is I guess we can call it a disassembler. You get your packaging, you put it in something that breaks it down on a molecular level and can be restructured to something else. That way we don't have this plastic like you said, all this cardboard, plastic that we keep creating on Earth with this company Amazon, whatever. Um, so when you have a culture that's based on minimalistic affluence, on preservation, and on like being frugal, being truly resource frugal, your behavior with one another will also change. Your level of appreciation and well, and it's also a simpler material culture does not necessarily mean a simpler intellectual culture.
Mm.
When you don't care so much about materialism, your mindset and your creativity will expand because there's other areas of life you can work on, focus on. So those things will exponentially increase and improve over time. So um, that's why I say really like an experimentation of looking at how life on Mars would be a great way for people to uh, let their guards down and reflect on how life on Earth should be. Because if we can create a society that does not use money and is automated fully, and using AI to manage things on Mars, and we don't have money or differential advantage or competition or hierarchy, then surely we can do that much easier on Earth.
Mhm.
And that is why I really need to link the lecture by Douglas Millett that he did on Norway about how to terraform Mars, and that would be a really good lecture for people to check out because he really took like a 2 hour time to break it down why we can't have a market economy anywhere outside in space. I mean, we're barely surviving capitalism here on Earth, let alone in space. You would self-destruct in a month. Who knows? Maybe a week.
Yeah.
I was talking to my friend Zach the other day. Even discounting, forget about space. Like, on Earth, it is so damn unsustainable. Capitalism should have collapsed 100 times over, but we just keep inflating it. We keep propping it up because we can afford to right now. Because planet Earth has spoiled us with the fact that we destroy one area. There's another thing that's available. You finish all the mining. There's fish. The fish is done. Computers. The computers done. Forest. It's like it gives us many ways to fuck up and keep restarting, hitting the continue button. Well, guess what? In space, there's no continue button. So, it should really enable people, like, and people who are watching this video, like, when you explain things to people, a good angle to use is like someone like Mars. Like, do you think we could have a capital system in Mars? Like, would we have a labor for income market where people are applying for jobs on Mars, or should everything as much as possible be automated? Do you want to be out there and on the surface of Mars with frigid temperatures and radiation with a pick and axe working as a laborer, or should that all be done by robots? That should liberate people's mentality to make them realize that, like, yo, listen, automation is the future, and if we automate things on Earth, then the entire concept of a labor for income system should be also questioned as well.
And of course, I that's one of the main reasons that I'm proposing what I'm calling ACES, the Abundance Centered Society. So we're talking about RBE, the resource based economy, and I'm just sort of taking those ideas of Jacques Fresco and expanding upon them with the last 20 years of new updates and other ideas and bits, and applying the cradle to cradle, those sorts of things, a lot more automation. But he had all those fundamentals there. Um, uh, we're still talking about a post scarcity society. That's the main bit, and there's a few different just flavors or variants of it around. But I do know some people who keep wanting to talk about, oh, but maybe we can use money in this way or that way. So they usually is, oh, well, we can get rid of the one problem you highlighted about labor for income and go, oh, well, we'll make it UBI, universal basic income. And they see that as a patch. But it's a patch for one specific little problem, and it doesn't deal with all the resource issues. And so we would be automating things in a way that we're still very fastly, rapidly just using up what resources we can and throwing them in the trash, rather than building things to be, disassembled into the component parts. Now, it might not be that we have nanotech that can pull it down at the molecular level. Early on, we're going to need to build things to be just physically pulled apart in a better, a less energy intensive way. And even things like, okay, we've got kids, they've got diapers, and So you're throwing away diapers, and then people are like, oh, they smell, so they wrap them in plastic. So you got plastic diaper things that then like,
Mm-hmm.
why aren't the yes, there's cloth, but the cloths aren't very good. Like there needs to be go. This is a biological system. Let's treat it as a biological system and not throw bits of plastic in there to try
Yeah.
and fix that,
Yep.
and treat
That's why, like,
different
well,
things accordingly.
yeah, I mean, that's why, like, in an ecosystem like on Earth, nothing is wasted, nothing is extra, nothing is shortened. Like whatever is used, like the microtransactions between the fungi, tunnel networks underneath the trees, um, and like when an animal dies, they decompose. The energy is released into the earth, into the soil, allows for microorganisms to thrive, and those microorganisms will make the soil thrive. And when the soil thrives, plants grow, the herbivores come and eat the plants, and they poop and they refertilize. So it's like it's a closed loop beautifully. I mean, it's technologically marvelous what nature has done without any thought being given to it. It's subconscious. It's completely like closed loop and automated. It's like when you walk into the forest, right? When you walk in thousands of years ago as a hunter gatherer, you're going to the forest and foraging and finding fruits and picking things off the trees. I call that a form of like food automation. The forest is a form of food automation. It automatically keeps regenerating food for you. So,
Yeah.
in that sense, that is a true economy. That is an actual economy. An economy is supposed to be a system which uses the least amount of resources to make sure people have their needs met and they don't engage in conflict with each other. And, they're able to construct and build and process and harvest all those things in a minimalistic kind of perspective. Whereas the concept of economy has become so distorted, become so weird, so misunderstood to people. They think that the economy is something that's supposed to grow. So the whole growth economy is like, okay, the growth economy is a completely alien concept that is completely distorted because when you're trying to grow an economy, you have to keep harvesting, keep extracting, keep distributing, keep manufacturing to create this inflated concept of job growth. The jobs have to be you have to keep creating jobs, keep extracting, keep using things as fast as possible to what? To perpetuate an artificial hierarchy, which if we look at this whole growth economy, majority of the growth, the profits go to the top 1%. So it's an elitist concept. Um, Nowhere on earth, nowhere in nature is there a growth economy, an idea like a growth economy. You can't have a growth economy on Mars. You can't have a growth economy in nature. You can't just keep cutting trees down exponentially 2-3% faster every year to build more houses every year to keep this thing going because it's eventually going to hit a roadblock. It's eventually going to hit a brick wall, and that brick wall is natural earthly limits. And so that brick wall will be met much sooner on Mars, much, much, much sooner, because we don't have, like I said, a continue button when you're out in space, you know. And so yeah, like going back to what you said, um, we need to like it'll give us an understanding of what an economy is supposed to be, you know. Like
Mm.
I think just studying like what happens in space, but also studying our ancestors, what they did on Earth, the hunter gatherers, still the ones who are living right now in the Amazon. Look at the way they conduct themselves with such little technology and resources. Yes, they don't have poverty, Like the mere fact that they don't have poverty, given what little things they have to work with, it's quite remarkable. And it should have us reflect and understand, okay, like we have technology, we have automation, we have medicine. We can do much better. What are we doing?
Yeah. A couple of things. For one, the growth should be starting to slow down already. We have already passed global peak birth rate. So
Yeah.
globally, we're currently at about 8 billion people, and we look like we're going to stop at about between 10 and 12 billion people on the planet at
Yeah.
the current rate. We're basically just filling up some gaps in, almost like lost generations in Africa, and that's mostly it. Like we're slowing down now, and that should be fine, except for the fact that we have an accounting system that, as you said, was expecting all of this infinite growth on a finite
Yep.
planet.
Yep.
Um, And so, all right, if you've got an accounting system that's, you know, invalid like that, then that's something that you should change. You know, look, we can't keep doing this. We have real physical limits. We also have to just change all sorts of other things that we're doing. Um, and while we're at it, we're currently living in a world with representative democracy. We're voting for people to represent us, but we still live within that economic system that says we should work in our own self-interests. So, of course, we're voting for politicians who we think most closely match, our interests, but they're working in their own self-interest. So, you know,
Yeah,
there's
and
this
also
weird
we have
dichotomy.
money, and when you have the
And
concept of just having a mere concept of money, you can't have representative democracy because
yeah,
like we
that's what I'm
always
saying.
say, you're only as free as your purchasing power allows you to be. And guess who has the most purchasing power? The corporations. So no matter who you vote for, they're going to be loyal to whoever pays them the most, and we don't pay them the most. The corporations pay them the most. So that's why it's a false democracy. It's not a real democracy.
Yeah. So,
Like
I
like
mean, a
like a
couple,
real democracy would enable all ideas to be given equal weight of consideration. A real democracy would be like, you know what? Okay, fine. We have a capital society, but if it was truly democratic, we would have an election where a representative of Marxism is up there, representative of communism, anarchism, capitalism, whatever. They're all up there presenting their ideas and giving equal exposure for people to decide what they want to vote for. But we don't have that. Um, Sorry to go on a tangent, but
no, I mean, you were asking more about the economy on Mars, and I didn't
yeah,
talk about the resource engine. So, this was, explained well by Jacques Fresco, in that we want to know, uh, where are all the resources and what are they currently being used for? What is their part of the cycle? So, hey, there's, metal and brick and whatever in this house, and there's uh, other materials being used here and there. How much water are we using? How much do we need? How much energy use is there? And you start tracking that. And one of the reasons to think about setting this up on Mars is you also need to track, you know, breathing and oxygen levels and all sorts of things
mm,
that we wouldn't get to that much more accurate level if we're just building something on Earth. It's not
yeah.
going to matter as much. We're going to be a lot more relaxed with it. Uh,
We have
but we
much more
build a
leeway on Earth.
Yeah, we got a
That's
lot
the
more
word I was looking
leeway.
for.
Yeah, that's it. So we're like, okay,
Well,
we're on Mars.
like on Earth, like breathable air is not a resource yet, at least. But like on Mars, like now we have to worry about water, soil, shelter, but also air is literally a commodity, a so-called commodity, whatever
Yeah, like
it's a resource that's limited,
you've
scarce.
you've got a certain amount of energy that can be, you've sent so many solar panels, you got one or two nuclear reactors. Great, that's your energy production. You've got to go mining for, like, iron and other metals and glass, but also water. So you extract the water out. It's frozen. So here's some big chunks of ice. You got to melt it down. You got to filter it and purify it and stuff because it's probably got all sorts of gunk in there. And then you use some of that. You actually, you know, electrolyze it into hydrogen and oxygen, and that's where you can get some of your oxygen. You put some of it through a Sabatier reactor to, along with some of the CO2 that you've extracted. The carbon you extract partly out of the ground, but a lot even out of the atmosphere. And so you're building rocket fuel. All of this, it all becomes really important. You're tracking how much of that you've got, how many people there are, and okay, how many hundreds of people are going to arrive in the next wave, in 2 years' time. How many more resources do we need? What do they need to bring along? What do we need to have in preparation for that? Uh, how much more do we need to add to the aquaponic system for growing their food and those sorts of things? And if you get that wrong on Earth, you're like, I'll just call up
Restart
and
and
order
try it
some
again.
some more grain or whatever it is. We stuffed up a little bit. But yeah, you've got to get it right. So that resource tracking bit is really important. And in there, I suggest that it should be effectively a distributed ledger system. So it's not quite a cryptocurrency, but it's using that sort of blockchain type technology and saying we have various computer systems around, IoT sensors and various other things tracking those resources. And now we can start saying, here's where it is and what it's doing. We can start predicting how much is going to be needed. And you can now start getting some questions of saying, we're going to need more power, or maybe it's power storage. Or do we store that power as thermal heat and molten salt? Or do we store it in a flywheel? Or what is the technology that we use? And so that there's a version of that where we say, let's let everyone on the base vote. You could also say, let's have the engineers vote. Or you could say, hey, look, the engineers are going to come up with what solutions we think are actually viable. What are the pros and cons? And it's like, well, this flywheel technology will be really good. It will be really fast to extract energy from it for electricity, but it's got to be built further from the base. Yeah, and if it, big giant heavy thing spinning, if it goes wrong, then it could damage things. The molten salt stuff, that'll be great for also acting as a heat source in case something goes wrong. So there's positives for
I'm
that.
not sure if you're aware, like when we did that episode with Simon Michel, he talked about the molten salt breeder reactor, and that's a very feasible concept that could be used on Mars.
Yeah,
the thorium based power.
So there's molten salt is in terms of thorium, but there's also just molten salt. Like I did a big whole thing of walk for solar. We walked for 2 weeks trying to get a lot of community awareness around solar thermal technology. A whole bunch of mirrors pointing at a tower. It melts a molten salt to about 560 degrees. And because this is out in Australia near the desert, you get lots and lots of solar power, and you get these big power plants that act as just as a heat storage mechanism that can be turned into electricity by boiling water, and the steam turns turbines.
Yeah. Got it.
So let's say we've got a few different technologies, and now is a question of what do we use as a form of okay, do we have everyone have a say in it? Does everyone just come up with different ideas? How do we deal with the proposals? There's a collective sense making process. We would have especially people who actually know what they're talking about coming up with ideas. It may be during that ideas generation process, anything can come along and people are like, oh wait, I never thought of doing that. We can put some water up in a tower and use gravity, or actually no, that's going to freeze up there, that's not going to work. Whatever it is, there's a whole bunch of convergence and then the divergence, and in that divergence bit of selecting what you want, you might be like, we can have more people this way or heat that way or whatever it is. Cool. These are the different trade-offs, and having people make that decision, I'm suggesting we use liquid democracy as the most likely mechanism, where you say, you know what, like me as someone who advocates and cares about this, I'm going to spend time researching it. I'm going to work out what I think is the best option. Whereas someone like, my wife, she's not that interested in that. So she could allocate her vote to me and say, I'm voting with what he does. And 3 other or 10 or 10,000 other people might allocate their vote to what I select, and some other people allocate to whoever else, and or they just directly vote. So you can have these systems where it's now this person I see, matches my value. They're doing the hard research. I'm going to allocate it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it comes to food, I'm going to allocate my vote to my wife because she's the one that cooks and is going to put
Mm-hmm.
more effort and research into that. So
Well,
depending on
that
what type
seems
of
just like
decisions.
that just seems like a participatory kind of
Yeah.
democratic system. Whereas like in capitalism, we have the corporate democracy, where like the shareholders and the board decides what happens with the company's direction, and it's often those who invest the most money. The fake currency. Whereas like in a hunter gatherer based or egalitarian based society, like anarchist, communal based kind of framework. Um, those who have the best ideas to perpetuate the survival of the tribe are the ones whose vote is given the most weight. Whereas in today's world, it's not who has the best idea, it's not who has the best concept, it's mostly who can invest the most to take the company in this or that direction. That's oftentimes how we see a lot of companies actually destroy themselves, because they have a bunch of people who don't know have any idea what to do with the direction of the company. They vote with their dollars. I want this done. I want that, and then the company just collapses and folds upon itself. Um, we don't have that, in a real economy, in a real participatory democratic framework.
Mm-hmm.
You would have people who just have the best ideas step forward, and their ideas are elected, and especially with today's age, with automation, AI, we can easily create a feedback system, filtration mechanism, whereas the AI guides us in our direction. So, like, let's say you have 3 or 4 engineers debating or discussing how to build, I don't know, an energy platform. Okay, what resources we use, where should it be built, how should it be built, and where should the energy be stored? All those things can be aided by an automatic, an AI system. Where, okay, hey, us 4 engineers, we have a question about this. What are your thoughts on it? You input the schematics, the AI does the thinking for you, it helps you arrive at your decision. So that's how we arrive at a decision, like what Jacques talked about, instead of making
Mm-hmm.
decisions. So um, I think those ideas are pretty quite fascinating. And like we've strayed so far from this thing. Where you know when in the corporate setting and a government setting, it's always comes down to the bottom line in capitalism, whereas it should not come down to the bottom line.
And so an interesting thing happens when you start thinking about it further, is you realize this system, we're allocating most resources. It can do predictions, it can do simulations. You obviously want it to be transparent so people know what algorithms are being run and stuff for the resource engine. You're saying, how do we allocate those resources? Here's the different ways that the things we matter about, care about. And so most of the politics and most of government systems get replaced by that. Like, here is a system that
Yeah,
if it fails, it's you got problems. But actually, it's replacing vast institutes of government.
yeah, like bureaucracy. You're removing the
Most of the bureaucracy.
bureaucratic, you know,
Yeah.
bureaucracy. Yeah,
So you will still have some things that are not like an engineering type decision. It's more of a personal opinion type of decision. So let's say the base on Mars grows. There's multiple different areas. There's a few million people on Mars. It's doing quite well, and you've got a group of people who are vegans and they collect together, and a group of people who are really high tech and they collect together, and some people who, what, we've gone and built some rainforest and they just want to live there. And so now you've got different groups of people who have different priorities. And the people in the vegan bit will say, hey, look, everywhere else is using an aquaponic system that has fish in it, and we don't like that. We want our area to be completely, animal cruelty free, everything like that. So we're going to have more specific, harsh requirements and if you want to go in there, you can't have any animal products on you, that sort of thing. So now you do have, you know, different cultural uh, areas, and the high tech people might say, "Hey, look, you need to have a phone or whatever their equivalent is in order to unlock the doors and in order to be, you know, able to get around." That's their requirement for the way things that, you know, work really well. And the people who are living in the trees might say, "Look, you got to be able to climb a tree." Yeah, like,
Yeah.
um, and
Hmm.
so politics gets replaced with people coming up with those norms and values, and then being able to have them still living in a world that has those, you know, core values and tenets of an abundant centered society, but having different priorities and different ways they're going about their idea of thriving in their life.
Well, it's what we often say is like politics is an extension of economics, and war is an extension of politics.
Mm.
So, um, a business, what was I trying to say? Like, yeah, like, so politics is an extension of economics, but business, like a business democracy, in a business democracy, um, politics would be an extension of the business mindset. So that will never work, in a business democracy, because it's all about money and power. Whereas in an economic system that's not based on the foundations of capitalism, an economic system that's based on like the things we talk about, automating work, um, egalitarianism, collaboration, open source, collaborative design system, like those concepts, like, okay, access abundance instead of private property, like that kind of an economic system would by default create just a completely new political system, which would actually become self-evident. The parameters will become self-evident because when you have different economic principles, automatically you create a new political system. When you have an establishment preserving economic system like capitalism, which is like, okay, infinite growth, competition, scarcity, all that crap, by default, the political system we have today, which is an extension of past political systems, it's a modern version of it, still was automatically generated because of the fact that we had that kind of elitist economic system. So, in a resource based economic model, which is based on natural law and respecting limits and research and constantly evolving, the political system would be a representation, an expression of the will of that economic system. You know, what do you think
Yeah,
about that?
I,
Does that make
I
sense to
definitely,
you?
definitely
It's an
agree.
extension, it's just an extension.
Yeah.
And so when people say how would we decide things in the future, like you can have a bunch of scientists making decisions for us. Who's to say those scientists will not act corrupt? Who's to say those scientists are not going to gain power? Well, look at the economic system. Why do scientists act corrupt in this system? Well, because we have money, because we have the corrupting medium. It can corrupt people clearly because it's about power consolidation. It's about vested interest. Every corporation is vying for advantage in their field, so you cannot trust anything. You have a bunch of companies creating the same product with little minor alterations, but they're all doing corrupt things behind the scenes and exploiting cheap labor and exploiting resources just to give you a product that they probably cost them a lot less money to make, but they're scalping you, they're raping your wallet. You think you're getting away with a cheap. You think you're making you're getting a good deal by spending $10 on a shirt. Oh yeah, great, but well, what was the cost truly of creating that shirt? Slave labor,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, what have you. So,
All those
in that
externalities.
kind of a framework, you can never have a true democracy or egalitarianism because it's based on unsustainable and exploitative principles. Um, I got a little carried away there, but I was basically trying to say that um that like yeah, like the principles become self evident, and when you have the exploitative medium, it's not gonna work. Um, yeah, yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I do know that there are some people who think we need to take some more baby steps before we can go to an abundance-centered society or some sort of post-scarcity society. And I've heard quite a few different, usually anarcho-capitalist, options of. You're talking about participatory democracy, and I definitely like that idea. Those most affected by a decision should have the most say in it. There's also a participatory economic idea. I talked about UBI. There's also a steady state economy concept, just trying to have uh, not infinite growth. There's true cost economics saying, let's work out what that actual value on human life, well-being, and especially the ecosystems are. And turns out like swamps are like way more financially beneficial than putting a shrimp farm there or something. That you work out those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
There's copiosis, and there's things like net benefit reward, creditalism. Ramsey's been working on. There's a few different ideas by people who are still trying to hold on to the idea that money itself is useful, but just we need to fix this one problem or this one other problem. And when you look at them all, you go, well, these are all trying to solve different problems, but that sort of post-scarcity society is trying to solve all of those problems.
Yeah.
There may be a thing where we have to push the Overton window a bit, and maybe people conceptually have to think, but to actually change everyone to be, into a new system, I think requires so much work that, it's hard to sort of jump to one and then jump to another. We should try jumping to what we need. And that's why, well, if we got the opportunity to start afresh on Mars, let's do that. Yeah. And I like what you were pointing out with politics is an extension of economics, and then war is an extension of politics. And it made me remember just a phrase that comes up of politics comes from poly meaning many, and then ticks meaning blood-sucking parasites. I know
Yeah,
politics is not quite
actually,
that, but yeah.
Yeah, like it's also like even it works also in reverse. So like war is an extension of politics, but the way you solve wars usually comes down to politics, not through killing people. So like looking at like the whole the conflict in the Middle East, for example, how is Israel going to get its hostages back? They got to negotiate. You can't just bomb people. You'll just end up killing all your hostages, which I don't think they care about the hostages anyway. But like, how do you resolve wars? Wars usually have to come through a diplomatic solution. You can't bomb your way to a peace treaty or the end of the conflict. You usually have to come through a political means. So war being an extension of politics still has to get resolved by politics. Now, politics itself being an extension of economics, how do political instability get solved? By having good economic principles. So it's all very much interconnected. So like if you have a very unstable economic principle like neoliberalism, it's going to lead to shock doctrine, what have you, austerity measures which destabilize the country, and they lead to political and social unrest, which then leads to demagoguery, like political icons being created, which end up destabilizing the system further. So if you want to have political stability, you have to have economic stability. If you want to have solve a military conflict, you have to have political stability. So like it all like branches, and also it's like a loop system. So the same thing when it comes to like going out in space. If you want to resolve conflict between the people out there and settle disputes, you got to make sure you really have your things worked out before you go there. You got to make sure you have a sound framework on what kind of economic thing you want to set up over there, what kind of a political and social organization you want to set up over there. So like, yeah, that's why it's like I was mentioning corporations before. Like you can't have 100 different corporations creating a nuts and bolts for a specific tool. Universally upgradable components, which means that one entity should be the one creating the best of everything on Mars. So you don't have to be like, oh yeah, this bolt fits into this product, and this nuts and screws fits into this product. This is what we do on Earth. This is what we're doing this on Earth because we have a lot of leeway. We can have I don't know 2,000 different car companies creating the same goddamn thing. But on Mars, we have to have one entity creating the best of one thing because we're working with limited means. Which then again, like always, this should be a very good reflection point on okay, if we're able to create the best of everything on Mars for purely sustainability reasons to make sure that product lasts as long as possible and does for the pure utility of that product, then damn, why can't we do that shit on Earth where we have so much abundance? So
Yeah,
yeah,
I have a whole thing about uh, vacuum cleaners as an example, um, where most houses have a vacuum cleaner, and they work for a while. That's fine, but you could probably get rid of, say, 50 vacuum cleaners and replace them with just one or two really good vacuum cleaners. If those vacuum cleaners, they're designed to last, so it sort of industrial grade, good quality. If they're automated, then that's even better. So now you just have a vacuum cleaner come in automatically, you know, clean your room, and you don't have to think about it. And it's servicing 50 other apartments, and no big deal. And it's designed to also recharge itself, repair itself. If there are problems, it should detect, oh, this dooflicky, gear's going to break or whatever it is. I need maintenance, I need filter cleaning, whatever it might be. And so now you have almost a 50th, or at least 25 times less vacuum cleaners, because you're building them to last. And it's also built as part of the cradle to cradle cycle. So when they do finally get to a point where, like, hey, we've got better vacuum cleaner technology, um, or these ones just need a replacement, yeah, you can disassemble them, melt down the component parts, remake new things from them. Awesome. Maybe we need more robots that are helping in the hospital or something along those lines. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
by making things built to last, that makes a big deal. The one other thing was making things designed to degrade, because
Yeah,
it's bionutritional and good for the environment. So you could have shirts or clothing, as a bad example, but maybe biodegradable packaging. It's designed to you know last a few weeks, degrade, and you will have signs in the parks saying please litter here, because it's good for the environment.
yeah, yeah.
um,
And it's like a permaculture concept, like nothing goes to waste. You keep mulching whatever things that are waste products you have. You put them in the mulch pile, so it breaks down and can be used for yeah, to enrich the plants again. So nothing should be lost, and everything should be used. Um and I think just the concept of like an access based system can preserve so much more because like here on in the city in New York, whatever, you don't want to own a car. You want what the car can do for you. So it's like the utility of the product is what you want. You don't want the actual car. You don't want to have to deal with the car, parking it somewhere, worrying about tickets, insurance, and then all this crap. No, you want to just you want to have access to what the car provides for you, which is transportation. So if you use that concept, then you need many less cars because like I always say, 80% of a car's lifespan is spent sitting somewhere not being used because we're dealing with this atrociously inefficient concept called private property. Whereas, let's say you're on Mars, you don't want to have 8 cars for the 8 scientists, eight whatever, like this automated stroller that whatever, I forgot the terminology, but like basically you can only afford to have maybe 2 cars, two transportation vehicles for the 8 people, because when they're using it, they bring it back, and the other guys can use it when they need to. But like strictly for utility. So when you have that idea in mind, you reduce so much of the resources. So much waste goes out the window. and you can be much more efficient with how you're, economizing your actions. So yeah,
Yeah. And you apply that to Earth and you realize, look, we're 3 times over the carrying capacity of the Earth. Like, great, but we could be using, you know, 10, a 15th, a 20th the amount of resources if we actually went through and set up, access abundance, automation, closed loop
yeah,
material flows. We don't have to be thinking of we are running out of resources. We instead need to go, okay, private property is probably the thing that has to go instead of our lives.
yeah,
I would prefer to get rid of private property um, than find
yeah,
out that we've just destroyed the planet so much that there is no longer carrying capacity on the
yeah.
on
I mean,
Earth.
I mean, just think about it, like having an access, abundance, focused economy. Like what Jacques Fresco told me personally is like, just think about how many millions, if not, I don't know, tens of millions of tons of metals we waste to put guardrails and like bolts and locks and security entrances for like people who own these big mansions. If you just shared everything and people had a dignified life, there's all that need to create guardrails and bolted doors and metal infrastructure to keep people from the outside from coming in, or keep it from the inside safe, whatever. All that shit would go out the window. You don't need all the security. The best security is make sure we take care of people. But we've come to this stupid idea that you have to just have brute mindset, have a bunch of security guards to keep those uncivilized people from coming in and taking what you have. Whereas, like, if those people had what they need themselves, they wouldn't care to come take your stuff, And so, you know, having a concept of private property and competition and all this nonsense out in space would be a fabulous way to destroy yourself within a week or two.
Hoarding would be frowned upon.
Yeah, hoarding would be very much frowned upon.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I was talking to my friend the other day. I was like, why did Donald Trump become president? Why are people like Elon Musk and all these other narcissists getting so much prominence in society? You know why? Because lying has become a very profitable venture. Being a liar. Like, lying was very much against our evolutionary fitness thousands of years ago. Like, culturally, it was very much shunned upon. And, like, if somebody lied perpetually in a tribe, they would not be trusted anymore. And if you're not trusted anymore, you're pretty much good as dead. The tribe will get rid of you. They're like, you know what? You're not good for us. You're only thinking about yourself. So you're a liar. You're done damage to our tribe. We can't respect you anymore. But in today's society, because you're not lying to somebody in face to face, you're just lying on a screen, and that thing gets duplicated across the internet. There's no consequence. There's no ramification for lying. And so when you say sensationalized, crappy things like they're eating dogs and cats in this place or that place, like what Donald Trump said, is very sensational. And living in a media ecosystem of the media is just entertainment. It's not really based on informing people. So when you have that kind of culture, when you lie perpetually, like Donald Trump and Elon Musk do, they rise to prominence because those things really sell. They're sensational. So I don't know where I was going with this, but like basically, you know,
We live in a post-truth world.
yeah, we live in a post-truth world. It doesn't matter what you say. Somebody can call it fake news, and anybody can find a study that can confirm their biases. It's such a dark period right now we're living in. It's like we should return to the point of like, you know what, truth and objectivity should be valued, and lying should be completely. Anybody who lies perpetually should be discredited. But like Donald Trump, a person who's pretty much on record, has lied more than anybody during his. I think he had 13,000 lies during his first term or whatever. They counted them. That person should not be given any. They should not be given any leverage of power.
So I have a point in my podcast about uh, people who are sort of unfit for, especially helping decision making, all of that, but probably shouldn't be sent at all. Would be
Yeah.
psychopaths and psychotics. So Donald Trump. If you go listen to the book Taming Toxic People by David Gillespie, he explains how Donald Trump is considered higher on the psychopathy test than Hitler.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'll
because
actually, I don't find that to be too shocking personally, but to say that is pretty significant.
so it's because there's different
Tears.
sections to psychopathy. Like there's the narcissism side and
Yep.
in various other aspects. Even though Hitler definitely killed more people, as
Yeah.
far as we know,
Yeah.
um, and the other bit was that even Hillary Clinton is quite high on that psychopathy
She is. Yeah.
level. So I can understand
Well,
why
okay, well,
people
sorry
are.
to cut you off, but
Yeah,
Hitler, as crazy as he was, he, I mean, I guess you could say he kind of cared about the German people. He cared about his culture. He cared about trying to preserve Germany and like save Germany. I guess in his distorted view, Trump doesn't care about anything. So when you say
mm,
like he scores higher on a narcissism scale, it's true because Trump is value neutral, value empty, not neutral, value
yeah,
empty. He
and
doesn't care about anything. Like he'll say a bunch of anti-Semitic shit because whatever, that's how he feels. But as soon as you give him a bunch of Jewish people who are lobbyists, give him money, oh, okay, I love Israel. But as soon as Israel doesn't bring him profits, he'll just scrap the whole thing because the guy doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about America. It's funny that a guy who only cares about himself would bring about the mantra of like make America great again. No,
mm,
he doesn't care about America at all. But he's such a salesman to simple-minded people. He's so good at selling his perspective to them because he's a narcissist and because Americans are pretty much stuck in a state of like arrested development. We're such an immature culture here in the United States that we voted for this guy. But like, sorry to cut you off, but like, just bring
no,
it back to what you said. Please go ahead, explain more about that whole narcissism spectrum and the personality disorder of
yeah.
Trump and
So
Hillary.
yeah, psychopathy. Obviously, psychopaths lack empathy. There's two ideas around psychopaths. One is there's not enough like neurons in their brain to their frontal cortex, so the
Yeah,
frontal cortex part doesn't basically tell them no, this is bad.
yeah.
Uh, the other
Because they can't
part,
put themselves in they don't have enough mirror neurons to put
mm,
themselves in the shoes of the other person to have empathy. They
yeah,
lack that ability.
and the other idea is that they've had a flood of serotonin usually during childhood to the point that it has burnt out those neurotransmitters or
Wow.
receivers, and so the it's like the volume of a whole section. It's like not a specific part of their brain, but any neurons that were using serotonin, just the volume got switched down a lot. And that's mostly used for that type of empathy and those sorts of things. So they still feel emotions, but they don't feel concerned for other people in that way that we do, and
Yeah.
they obviously very good.
Yeah,
So
like Trump came out for after he got shot in the ear, he came out to like a show and he had like tears in his eyes. But like I can guarantee you, man, those tears when people are cheering for him, he was like, those tears were for him. He was like, I feel
yeah,
so bad for myself. And I feel so happy that I can be cheered. People love me now and love me more than before, Sorry, but that's what
yeah,
I thought when I saw him like had tears in his eyes. No, the guy's human. He's not a robot, but he's a sociopath.
yeah. Um, so obviously, sociopaths and psychopaths, you would not want, especially on somewhere like Mars, where you fuck
Yeah,
up.
oh, definitely not.
Like almost all movies where there's a bad guy, they're pretty much always a psychopath. You know, probably 98% of the time. And psychotics are the other ones. Just people whose idea of reality is so distorted that they can't properly understand the world. Um, these might be some people who are just super paranoid, or they see things that aren't there, and they'll hear stuff and whatever else. So these are the two types of people that you especially want to help identify in society and be able to treat.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
also, I mean, we can pretty much agree that, like, there may be a genetic component to it, but also psychopathy and sociopathy is
annoying.
pretty much generated by our culture, though. Very much, it's very much pinged and heightened. Like emotional sensitivity, emotional intelligence, empathy, caring, and all that. Being congruent with your inner and outer feelings. Those things are not really like they're not encouraged and perpetuated by the culture. Our culture is more likely to create sociopaths and narcissists than the other thing. So
Mm,
I'm pretty
impact.
sure if we create about a resource-based economic kind of thinking elsewhere, it wouldn't perpetuate sociopathic thinking. And I'm pretty sure most astronauts, when they go in space, are given some kind of testing to make sure they cooperate well. Even in today's society, I'm pretty sure they're given like a testing to make sure the guy, we're not sending a fucking narcissist, a sociopath out in space with the other crew that's going to kill everybody, for his own self-preservation, which is going to end up killing himself anyway. So, yeah, just to mention on that, like I feel like the genetic component is there, but I think like the cultural aspect is not looked at upon as much in today's society, especially with the criminal justice system. It's like somebody kills somebody, oh god, the guy throw him in jail. No, maybe the guy was just a very abused person. So you gotta look at the culture. Sorry to cut you
Yeah,
off, but I just had
yeah,
to get that in there.
no,
It's
definitely. And the MOA gene does make people more sensitive to serotonin, and so if they have a good childhood, they're more likely to be an empath and will be more sensitive to people. However, usually what happens is they have shitty parents who abuse them. They experience really traumatic things. They see you know someone decapitated or some horrible event. So sometimes it's a continuous degradation, or sometimes just a really bad event that seems to be the main causes of psychopathy. And then they're not things that we're very good at dealing with. I mean, even just a car accident, you're like, well, we're really bad at just even stopping car accidents, and yet they're very traumatic. We could have proper ways of isolating cars from people. Just put up some walls, and you know you could definitely make a big reduction with, but it requires more resources, and we're not going to do that.
yeah,
But a key point we're talking about is violence, and uh, I think Gary Slutkin says it really best is we should treat violence like a contagious disease. You don't want
yeah,
to inflict it nor spread it.
yeah. Also, James Gilligan talks about violence as a behavioral violence and aberrant behavior should be looked at as a form of social disorder, not
Mm.
like a moral thing, a moral
Mm.
issue. We can't impose morality. We have to look at behavior just like the same way we look at biology. A person's behavior is triggered by something, and then we got to find out the social causes of what's causing that pollution.
Yeah, exactly. So the violence like a contagious disease way of thinking about things is okay. Look, you got the Bloods and Crips or whatever, and
Hmm.
LA was an
Yeah.
example where here's these two gangs, they want to fight, and you know someone it goes and shoots someone else because they chatted to the girlfriend in the wrong way or
Yep.
something along those lines. You go, all right, well, you insert some people in there who are friends with both groups, who see that some sort of conflict is arising, and instead say, let's simmer this down, let's work out ways of reducing this. So you're now trying to identify potential issues. You're trying to reduce that, and if with COVID we're wearing masks, we're doing all sorts of distancing, whatever else, to try and reduce the spread. But we're not applying techniques to try and reduce the amount of violence. Instead, we just usually turn up the police knob and are just like, let's send more police in to try and deal with the aftermath rather than prevention.
Yeah, we're doing patchwork. We're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think actually that sort of patchwork reactivity process is a almost a key identifier of capitalism is we're not proactive very well at all. It's, everyone's
Yeah.
expecting to just sort of wait until enough climate change hits that we then react, rather than being like, hey, let's go do something about it. I mean, thankfully solar panel prices have been going down, and partly that's just because solar panels are effectively sort of behind the meter, and they have
Yeah.
you know an extra, you don't have to worry about the rest of the grid until we get to so much that we're now hitting that
Yep.
they're affecting the grid.
Diminishing
But
returns eventually.
yeah,
Yep. Um.
um yeah, sorry, you
mhm.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. I got 10 more minutes
Yeah,
before I gotta do something, and I have to run to the bathroom really bad right now. But
yeah.
I was gonna like have you say something, and then I'll go to the bath. Maybe I know. We'll just wait. I'll wait until we finish before I go. I gotta go really bad. But
Yeah,
I
I
was
gotta
gonna
go shortly,
say
so
I wanted to talk about something that's very important. Is oh, okay, like so, like going back to what you said, like what Fresco used to say, ethics and morality have to be built into the system. So you can't just enforce a bunch of laws and say, hey guys, you have to be good, don't steal, don't be corrupt, don't lie, don't cheat. Well, if you have a system that promotes cheating, you can't expect people to go against the system's built-in shadow incentive, as Peter calls it, Peter Joseph. But like, um, but if you have a system that says, you know what, no, 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 on a systemic level, on a foundational level, we're based on sharing, egalitarianism, cooperation, open source, and access abundance. When you have that kind of foundational mechanism, you don't even have to worry about creating legislation saying you ought to do this, you ought to do that. People will naturally their behavior will reflect the socioeconomic premise that was imposed upon them. So same thing when it goes to that, comes to other aspects of society, and going to a place like Mars, for example. If you have the good rule structure, if the things are built in, then you don't have to worry so much about things well, forget about even like social systems. Like, how about technological and resource systems? If you have multiple layers of redundancy, of like fail safes. So like if one thing fails, system two kicks in to take care to control things. Like for example, on an airplane, if something goes wrong, I'm sure they have multiple layered systems of redundancy to make sure that, okay, it's fail safe two kicks in. An engine fails, I'm sure there's something that can be triggered to take care of that problem. Same thing has to be like systemically, it has to be built into the design of the system so that you don't have to even worry about it. And so capitalism does not have that. Capitalism is a very, like you said, reactionary. Something happens, something horrible happens, we got to go to the government. The government bails this guy out or bails that guy out to preserve the system, not to preserve the people. But when you have a ecologically like accountable system that's also socially accountable and takes into consideration the right use of technology, then those things are built into the very design. So you don't have to so much worry about the afterthought and patchwork and reactionary thinking, but instead being proactive and having a foresight to see things like multiple layers down the line. That way, when problems come up, you have a way to deal with them. You have a way to reply and have a systemic kind of like a response mechanism. You know, um, so yeah, that's what I was
yeah,
thinking.
yeah. So having those fail safes, building in ethics and morality as core components, and understanding not just human things, but also understanding that we're in an ecosystem and we need many different parts and multiple different types of systems. Just, the ecosystem, the technical systems, the social systems, and what I say that we should have a responsibility to those systems, and it feels like people shirk or don't have a responsibility. They think they have money so that they can get away with things. There's various bits like that, and people are in it for their own self interest in various ways. Uh, Instead of, if you change the system enough, collaboration becomes the default instead of competition. And
Yep.
there's a great thing about how if you have a group of people who are competitive and a group of people who are collaborative, then the collaborative group can beat the competitive group. You just think about it with like chickens as a bad example, but like if there's chickens who are fighting each other and competing, then yeah, they're getting injured. They might be bigger and stronger, but the collaborative group can work together to, you know, group one versus, you know, the collaborative group will be able to easily overpower the competitive group. So we know that collaboration can win. We just need to put it in the right context and the right systems that allow it to do that, to flourish. So I'm hoping that we can set up a system on Mars that actually enacts these things. Before we get to Mars, I would love to simulate some of this, even just in some computer games.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, that's something that Peter was talking about for a while. Like the what was it called? It was called the something project. There's a website for it. It's called the Universal. Shit, I forgot. He had a thing. The Global Redesign Institute. Remember we
oh
talked
yeah,
about that for a while. There was a thing for a while. I mean, maybe we can get that to happen eventually one day. Who knows? But the Global Redesign Institute is like a can, can be created kind of like an interface platform, like a gamer, like a video game where like you like a Sim City kind of. You know, you're given this much land, you have this much topsoil, you have this much water. Here are your energy, your renewable energy. Here's your scarce energy, you know, non-renewable energy. And so here are a bunch of inventory items for you. What can you do with it? So that concept would be really cool. Like before we even go terraforming any planet, for us to have, like, you know, so many stupid video games out there. It'd be awesome to have a video game that like people is fun for people to engage with. Okay, how do we, you know, the Global Redesign Institute? How do we redesign society? Not only on a social level, but on an infrastructure level. How do we make it more sustainable? These are things we need to be putting out there. Like we need to make the idea of sustainability fun, a fun exercise for people to be engaged with. You know, so
yeah,
it would be awesome if we could have something like that, like an app or something, like a video. You know, like on your mobile phone, you can just play around with it every day. So the fun part helps you in your education and understanding the critical importance of these principles, you know?
yeah. I got. I'm hoping to put out another podcast episode for the Abundant Mars this year. I'm only averaging about, you know, 2 episodes a year at the moment because I've got a whole bunch of, yeah, need to pay bills and working on a
Hmm.
startup and have a family and various other
Yeah,
things. But this has been good. It's great to just have a chat. Um, yeah, thank you
yeah,
so much for this.
it was awesome, man. I mean, and for the people reviewing this, I'm gonna put the links to your podcast in the video description, so when we're done, people can have a way to check out your content. And I really encourage people to check out what you do, man, because you know Zeitgeist Movement people, you know, we've been in this for a while, and we know what's up. We've done our
Yeah,
research. You know, I consider the people in TZM to be one of the more intelligent, kind of like more well-read group of people, which I love working with and talking with because it's like a breath of fresh air to not have to cut through all that crap. You know, to have to go through all that crap to break things down. And yeah, man, I think what you're doing is great. The Abundant Mars podcast, you know, people should check that out. And yeah, hopefully we get more going in the future, more discussions on these kind of things. This was very much an unscripted kind of preliminary talk that we're having here. We both didn't have any idea what we're going to talk about, but like it's cool that we hash things out, you know.
yeah. I hope that you get to listen to the Tower of Aces ideas. I've got sort of 10+2 suggested rules to live by.
Okay.
And so I've only got episode 1 up. That's only the first 3. The next one will hopefully, you know, so 2 more episodes to go to complete that, which will
Okay.
then let me.
Cool.
I would love people to give me critical feedback and be like, hey, what about this? And how do we do that? And whatever else. So, yeah, hopefully we can have another interview at least after that.
For sure. I mean, I'll check out more of your videos to have a better understanding of what all the things you talk about. That way we can have a more like productive discussion on it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you know, either we make it on Earth or we can't make it anywhere else. Still, you know, still we still have planet Earth. We still have so much that we can work with, and we're just mismanaging everything right now. You know.
The point of the abundant Mars stuff is saying if we can get it to work on Mars, why the hell aren't we doing this on Earth? But it's a blank slate. Let's start with the best ideas and the best ways of doing things, and then being able to apply that to Earth and say, look, it works over there, it can work here. But right now, there's just so much inertia. There's so many people who have their, they want some greed, I guess,
Yeah.
is
Well,
the way of
the
putting
existing established
it.
infrastructure. It's just like I was telling my friend the other day, like yeah, RFK is put in charge of the whatever the health department in the United States. Okay, he might be advocating for like healthy eating habits, but like, come on, these companies have had their money invested in it like for so long, like school lunches and whatever the food program, the agricultural sector, big agri has had their way for a very long time. They have a lot of money invested in the current existing infrastructure. They're not going to allow just one random guy, anti-vaxxer, to come in there and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna just revamp everything. Healthy food now. We're gonna remove MSG. We're gonna remove all these preservatives in the food supply. We're gonna remove pesticides and all. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. It's not going to happen. It has to be a systemic structural. It has to be systemic restructuring. You can't have personal decision making to bring about significant, at least long term change in the system. It has to be done from the ground up, foundational.
Might
Yeah,
need a bit of both, but we'll see.
yeah, a bit of both. But
Yeah,
more than anything, people need to have a systemic viewpoint.
I
Like to
agree.
be systems thinkers. That's the whole point of what we're trying to do here as activists. To
Yeah,
encourage systems thinking. Don't be reactive, be
nailed it.
proactive. So
I,
yeah,
I love that. Good tagline there.
yeah. Good,
All
man. Good
right.
stuff. Well, it was a
Cheers.
really good preliminary talk, man. Guys, check out Michael's work, and hey, man, we'll touch base for sure in the near future and do more
Yeah.
talks like this.
And you're doing some really great stuff as well. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it, man. Thank you for joining me today for this talk, and keep the
Ha-
fight going.
Have a good one.
Yes,
Cheers.
take care, brother.
Thanks. Bye.